Welcome back to my workshop. Now today's a continuation of my blade changing series of videos, and today I'm going to talk about planers. Okay, these are hand electric planers, not your planer thicknesser or not your hand plane, but electric planers. Okay, I've got two different types here. Let's have a quick look and let's get changing some blades. Right, so first let's have a look at which devices we have. This one is the Workzone 18 volt. Now this is a CPL18W. Okay, this is obviously from Aldi's. And what you have here is the blades are here. Okay, and on this particular machine, there's two blades. So there's one here and then there's another one here. Okay, so they're the blades we need to change. What do we need to change these blades? Well, lucky for us, in here, okay, we've got a little toolkit. It comes with an Allen key and a small spanner. Okay, so they actually come with the machine, so you shouldn't need anything else. Okay, so what I'll do is it's easier to actually hold these in a vise when you're changing this. So let's move over to the bench and change those. Right, so to make my life easier changing these blades, what I've done is I've quickly set up my little Stanley bench vise here. Okay, it's just clamped to my bench. If you haven't got one of these, don't worry, but I find it easier for holding the planer. Okay, you don't have to grip it too hard, but it's just so it clamps in. But before we do anything else, this is obviously a battery version, so we don't want to be losing our fingers. So we'll take the battery out, and then all I want to do is hold this in the vise so I can change the blades without it falling over. Okay, so it's basically like this. Okay, it's fairly solid. You're not going to be doing any work with it. You just need it so you can actually get to it to change the blades. Right, let's get our toolkit and start taking the blade out. Right, so now we're ready to change the blade. Now be very careful because the blades on these are very sharp. Even when you're going to change them, they can still be sharp. Now what you have to do is rotate the drum around to, this is obviously the first blade. Now on here, hopefully you can see, there's a grub screw here and another grub screw here. Okay, and then 3 bolts. Now obviously those 3 bolts should be the size of this spanner, hopefully. Okay, nice spanner. Now to get this blade out, what we have to do is tighten these bolts in. So you're basically winding these bolts in, because all these bolts are doing is holding this cartridge in place. Okay, so basically being careful with your fingers, make sure it's gripped in the vise properly. Wind these 3 bolts in. Now you probably have to wind them in most of the way, so I'll do that. Okay, so that's them all wound fully in. Now that makes this whole cartridge loose. Okay, but you can't quite pull it out. So what you have to do is push this little bit of plastic here down. Okay, and hold it down. Now this is a bit fiddly and can be a bit sharp. Okay, let's see if I can do this. Okay, so that's the cartridge now pulled out. So the blade is actually this bit here, okay, which you can probably see, nice and shiny. So let's take that out and have a look. Okay, so there's the blade we want to change. Now this one is not actually, this plate here is not fixed to this part here. Okay, it's just held together by a wing and a prayer at the moment. So all I've done is I've inserted a small screwdriver in one side, okay, and that releases this. Okay, and then the blade is free to come out. Okay, there's 2 little lugs here, one there and one there. They correspond to lugs on here. So when this plate goes back on, it can only go in one position. Okay, so you haven't got to worry about that. Now the blade obviously has to be orientated the correct way. Okay, so if you look on the end here, without dropping it. Okay, obviously the slope of the blade here has got to be in the right direction. So take note of that when you're taking it apart. Now at this point I'd probably advise giving this a little bit of a clean up, because you get a build up of a lot of rubbish on here. So before you change the blade, let's give this a clean. Okay, so to change the blade, obviously you need a new blade, but which one do you buy? Okay, the measurements you need to know to order are, let's turn this on. Let's turn that on, 0 that. Okay, is the length. So in this case, it is 82 millimeters. Okay, you need the width of the blade. In this case is 5.3 millimeters, and the thickness of the blade, okay, 1.19. So they're the three measurements you need to get a replacement blade. Now these blades have got two cutting edges. Okay, you've got one on the top here and one on the bottom. Okay, so they can actually be rotated. Okay, so you get two shots at each one. Okay, but if you've had to buy new ones, I've got some of these ones here. Okay, these ones are actually PB29s. Okay, and it says 82 millimeters by 5.5 by 1.1. Okay, which was the measurements we've taken just now. Okay, so these ones should be good to go. But all I'm going to do for the purpose of this exercise is I'm going to refit the old blade just to show you how it's done. Okay, right, to put it back in again, make sure your cutting face is facing the right way. So in other words, the same way you took it off. You just put that in there for a second. Now this plate goes on the front with those two lugs locating in the lugs on the housing. Okay, so that's how it goes back together. Now make sure that the blade is the same distance either side, okay, because the blade is slightly longer than the housing. Okay, and then what we have to do then is refit that into the planer. Okay, so before we put the cartridge back in here, I suggest cleaning this out. That could be just a case of, if you've got an airline, obviously you can blow it out, but a paintbrush like this will do the job, because what you don't want is any debris sitting underneath here, because it will make the blade sit on the wonky. Okay, and what you do then is you take your cartridge that we just put back together, and exactly the opposite process as that we took it out. Now this is a little bit tricky, so I'm going to do my best. Go on, in you go. Okay, so once that's sitting in that position, make sure again that the blade is actually in the center. Okay, because the last thing you want is when it starts spinning for it to catch on the sides. Okay, hold that in place, and then I suggest tightening up the middle bolt first so you don't tip it from side to side. Okay, once you've got the middle one in, then you can start tightening up the outside ones. Right, as I've been tightening this is actually moved over to one side, so I've got to move it back. So loosen off the bolts again, move it back to the centre, and hope it doesn't move again. Okay, so those three should be tight now. Okay, make sure your blade is not sticking too far over one edge or the other, otherwise it will catch. Okay, if you've noticed here, there's a couple of little grub screws here, one there and one there. Now these are for adjusting the height of the blade with respect to the face of the planer. Okay, now that's entirely up to you how you want to set it up. whether you want it flush to this or flush to this side, it's entirely up to you. Okay, but that's where you adjust it. In your little toolkit that come with it, you get an Allen key, okay, and that literally just tighten or loosen those, and that will raise or lower the blade. Okay, so now these three are tight. This is not hanging over either side. Those two are in the right position. Now manually turn it over by hand, okay, minding your fingers, just to make sure that it doesn't actually catch on anything. Okay, and then you should be good to go. So what I'll do is I'll quickly plug the battery back in. Yes, it works. Okay, so that's that. All right, all that remains to do now is obviously put the toolkit back together like that, like that, and then shove it back in the tool. So that's that one done. Oh, that was a pain. Let's move on to the next one. Right, so the next device we've got here, this is a Bosch. This is quite an older machine. They still sell this one, but it's a slightly newer design. This is the Bosch PH01. Okay, very good plane. I've had it for ages. Right, this is slightly different the way these are fitted, so we'll take those off. This is obviously the corded version, so all the time you're doing this, again, make sure this is unplugged because you'll slice your fingers off. Okay, right, same again, we'll put this in the small vise to hold it still. Just one thing to note while we're here, now this has only got one blade, okay, so in theory this only cuts half the amount that the other one does, but it's a powered one, very good plane, removes a lot of material. Right, let's get this in the vise and get this blade out. Okay, before we stick this in the vise, obviously the tools you're going to need for this is just an Allen key, and again this device comes with its very own Allen key. Okay, it's shoved in the back here. It's got a nice little rubber casing on the outside. Now it's the first time I've ever seen this, but there it is, it's hiding around the back. Right, let's get this in the vise. Right, same again, remember these are going to be very, very sharp, especially when you're putting the new ones in. Now, the principle is slightly different with these. Now, what you do is you literally loosen off these two Allen bolts, or grub screws. Okay. Okay, you don't need to take them all the way out, you just loosen them off, and what happens is this plate here drops down, which makes the blade loose. Okay, now I looked through the official ancient documentation that come with this, and it says that if this sticks, okay, you can actually tap it with a small wedge of wood. I just happen to have one here, so you literally put that on here and give it a very slight tap. Don't go over the top, just a very slight tap, and that should free it off. Okay, so that drops back down, and then what you can do is you just slide the blade out of one side. So much easier than the other one. Now the blade is exactly the same. Okay, so you've got the one cutting edge here, turn it over, and you've got another cutting edge. Okay, so again you can use these twice. Let's just put it aside for 1 second. Okay, so while you're at this stage with the blade removed and this little bracket floating about in the breeze, it might be a good idea to give it a bit of a clean. Same again with the paintbrush or an airline, and if you really want to go to town, give that a really good clean, but just make sure there's no debris in there. Okay, same again as before, make sure the orientation of the blade is correct. Okay, to refit the blade, you literally just slide this one in like that, minding your fingers, and again make sure it's central on the drum. Then literally tighten up these two grub screws. Now do them one at a time, then move on to the next. Okay, so try and bring it up as even as possible to grip the blade. Okay, again, making sure that the blade doesn't move over to one side or the other. Okay, okay, once these are both tight, make sure the blade's level, and then make sure it rotates, okay, to make sure it doesn't overhang on either side. All right, so that one's back in. Job's a good one. Right, so that's both of those covered. Just one more thing I've noticed before we take it out of the vise. On the side of the drum here, okay, on the side of the drum here, there's a very small hole. Now I thought, what's that for? Now it looks like you could actually put a drill bit or something in there, and that will stop the drum moving around too much while you're changing the blade. So that might be a handy thing to do. Just make sure you take it out before you start it up, because that will be really bad. Okay. Right, job's a good one. Right, so that's it for changing electric planer blades on the only two blades I've got. Okay, this is the Workzone one and then the Bosch one. Both of these are great. Okay, this is a corded one and this is a battery powered one. Different fittings, same blade. The blades I use are these ones, which are from Trend. Okay, very good blades. They last absolutely ages. Okay, be careful when you're changing these. Don't cut your fingers, I tend to. But again, make sure you change the blades to a sharp blade, and nothing more dangerous than a blunt blade, because you end up forcing the tool through the piece of work. Okay, keep them sharp and keep it nice. All right, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye. Come on, in you go. Right, being careful all the time because the blades are very sharp and I don't want to cut myself again.